Okay, so activity 11 is the respiratory and the digestive systems. We're getting down to the very end, so congratulations. And the upper respiratory tract, basically table 11.1, is everything above the larynx. And we'll uh, talk about the larynx when we do the lower respiratory tract. But the upper respiratory tract, starting at table 11.1, and this is just a slideshow that's in your Canvas modules. So we have our nostrils and then the vestibule. And the vestibule is basically just the opening in your nostril. It's kind of like the pupil in your eye. It's just an empty space. So that's the vestibule. And then we already talked about the concha. And so you remember that the concha are those pieces of the skull that have the pseudostratified columnar epithelium lining them, and they're going to warm and moisten the air. So we've got the superior nasal concha, the middle nasal concha, and the inferior nasal concha. And then just this area below each concha, or concha, however you want to pronounce it, is called the meatus. So just below the superior nasal concha, we have the superior meatus, middle nasal concha, and then just underneath it is the middle meatus, and then the inferior nasal concha and the inferior meatus. So above the hard palate, but below the inferior nasal concha is the inferior meatus. And then we learned about our sinuses also when we were doing this skull. So we have the frontal sinus, the sphenoidal sinus is the yellow, and then the ethmoidal sinus is the teal color, and then our big maxillary sinuses here. So from this picture right here, this is the frontal sinus, and then this big one right here is the sphenoidal sinus. You can't see the ethmoidal or the maxillary from that slide. The pharynx is basically this shared space in the back of the throat. And I say shared because it just means that there is the potential for food or drink to go up into the nasopharynx, and then the oropharynx back here behind the tongue, and then the laryngopharynx or the laryngopharynx, which is the space behind the larynx. So they're just regions. So this upper red region is the nasopharynx, and hopefully you don't get food up here, but it's a possibility if you're laughing or get startled while you're eating. Sometimes food will come out to this nasopharynx. And then the oropharynx, this yellow, is the shared space shared by both the respiratory and digestive tract. Normally it is shared. And then below the level of the epiglottis is this area of the laryngopharynx, where hopefully only air gets down here. If you do get food or drink down here, then your body is going to try really hard to get rid of it by causing your trachea to spasm, which causes those coughing fits. So the hyoid bone is this little bone right here, and it divides, it is the actual division between the oropharynx and the laryngopharynx. So you can say that anything above the hyoid bone but below the uvula is the oropharynx, and everything below the hyoid bone is the laryngopharynx. Also included on table 11.1, which we've already talked about as well, is the hard palate, which is that palatine process of the maxillary bone, and also the palatine bones. And then the soft palate is this more, it doesn't have bone, it's just this tissue on the back of the throat. So if you open up your mouth really wide, you can see your uvula hanging down. That's part of the soft palate. So if this little section is tagged down here, we're usually referring to the uvula, but if this whole region is circled, we're looking for the soft palate. So the uvula is a part of the soft palate.